Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are taking a trip to a place that I think really holds a very specific spot in the imagination of anyone who knows Hong Kong. We're talking about Cheung Chau.
Oh, yeah, the dumbbell island.
Exactly, the Dumbbell Island. And the image we all have of it is, it's pretty consistent. It's that ultimate holiday escape.
Yeah.
You get off the ferry, you're hit with the smell of the harbor. Maybe you grab some of those giant curry fish balls. You see the tricycles dodging pedestrians, the Bun Festival towers going up in May. It just feels like this chaotic, vibrant, slightly, frozen in time fishing village.
It does feel that way. And honestly, it's kind of designed to feel that way today. But if you dig into the archives,
Yeah.
and really dig past the tourist brochures and into the actual land registry records from 1905 and these old colonial ordinances, you realize that whole holiday vibe is just the surface layer.
And that's what really jumped out at me from the research stack you sent over. Because we tend to think of land in Hong Kong as just, expensive.
Very expensive.
Right. But on this tiny, 2.4 square kilometer piece of rock, land wasn't just expensive. It was literally the battleground for a century-long experiment in, feudalism, segregation, and self-governance.
It's a fascinating microcosm. You essentially have three distinct powers fighting for control over the ground beneath everyone's feet.
Yeah.
You have a single clan acting as a second landlord for nearly 100 years. You have a colonial government trying to enforce a racial health zone. And then you have this shadow government run entirely by a Taoist temple.
It's wild. So the mission for this deep dive is to give everyone listening a sort of X-ray vision. Because the next time you take that ferry ride over there, we don't want you just seeing storefronts and hiking trails. We want you to see the invisible lines that dictated who could live where and who actually owned the island.
And to do that, we really have to start with a concept that sounds almost medieval, but it was a harsh reality on Cheung Chau until the mid-1990s.
The 1990s?
Yeah, the 1990s. It's the concept of the grand landlord.
All right, this is the story of the Wong Wai Tsak Tong. And when I read this in the sources, I had to double-check the dates. It just didn't seem possible in a modern financial hub. Who were these people?
So to understand the Wong clan, we have to rewind to the Qing Dynasty, well before the British leased the new territories in 1898. The Wong clan was originally from Fujian.
Okay.
And they settled in the area, and through the standard mechanisms of the Qing bureaucracy, they secured what are known as red deeds.
Red deeds. I assume that refers to, an official stamp.
Correct. It was officially stamped with the red seal of the local magistrate. Now, you have to look at the Qing government's problem at the time. They have all these outlying islands, remote fishing villages, scattered farmers.
Right.
Sending imperial tax collectors to knock on every single wooden door is just an administrative nightmare. It literally costs more to collect the tax than the tax itself is worth.
So it's a pure efficiency problem.
Exactly. So they outsourced it. They found a powerful local entity, in this specific case, the Wong clan, and they said, we designate you as the landlord. You are now responsible for the taxes of this entire area.
Wow.
You collect from the people, you pay us our cut, and you keep the difference.
So it's essentially tax farming.
It's pure tax farming.
Ugh.
But legally, it created this massive distinction between what they called bottom soil rights and surface rights.
Interesting.
The Wong clan owned the bottom soil, the perpetual permanent right to the earth itself, with the regular people living there, building their houses, farming. They only owned the surface right to use it.
Right. So let's fast forward to 1898. British Empire leases the new territories, which of course includes Cheung Chau, for 99 years.
Right.
And the primary goal for the British is defense, expanding the buffer zone for the colony. Now, usually when a new imperial power moves in, they just rewrite the property laws to fit their own system. But the documents show that didn't happen here.
It didn't happen at all. And that is the crux of the entire century-long problem. In 1905, the British administration sent a land officer, a guy named Bruce Shepherd, to survey the island.
Just to figure out what they actually had?
Exactly. His job was to figure out who owned what so the crown could start collecting rent.
And he walks right into this incredibly complex web of topsoil and bottom soil rights.
He does. And Shepherd, he's a pragmatist. He looks at the Wong clan's old Qing Dynasty red deeds. He looks at the relative stability of the island, and he basically decides not to rock the boat. He validates the Wong clan's claim.
So the British colonial government effectively just rubber stamps a Qing feudal system.
They formalized it into what was called the block crown lease. The government made the Wong Wai Tsak Tong the registered owner of about 90% of the private land on the island.
That is a staggering monopoly. 90%.
Huge. And what it meant was if you were a local resident of Cheung Chau living in a stone house that your grandfather built with his own hands, you were legally just a sublessee. You were caught in a trap.
Let's break down what that trap actually felt like for a regular person day to day. You're living there, you think you own your home, but you're actually paying rent to this clan.
You're paying rent to the clan, and then the clan is turning around and paying a portion of that to the government. That's the financial cost.
Right.
But the real friction, the part that drove residents crazy for decades, was the transactional cost.
Because you couldn't just sell your house, right?
Not at all. If you wanted to sell your property, or even if you just wanted to get a mortgage from a bank to fix a leaky roof, you didn't have a clear title. You had to go, hat in hand, to the Wong Wai Tsak Tong and ask for permission.
Unbelievable.
And of course, they would charge you a transfer fee for that permission.
So every single time the local economy moved, the clan took a cut.
Yes. And this wasn't some tiny administrative fee. It could be really significant. It created a massive barrier to modernization. I mean, imagine trying to get a modern bank loan in, say, 1980, when your property deed says you're technically a subtenant of a clan from the Qing Dynasty. Banks hated it.
It's amazing that this system survived through the massive modernization of Hong Kong. Through the skyscrapers going up in Central right into the 1990s.
It really is.
But before we get to how that finally ended, we need to look at another completely different power dynamic. Because while the Wong clan completely controlled the crowded Central Isthmus where the Chinese population lived, the geography of the island tells a very different story, if you look up.
You mean the peak, the southern high ground?
Yeah. Today, if you walk up there, it's gorgeous. You have these large plots, quiet roads, nice sea breeze. But the sources show that in 1919, this area was the subject of a very specific law, the Cheung Chau Residence Ordinance.
This is a textbook example of colonial spatial governance. The ordinance explicitly stated that no one could live in the Southern District without the specific consent of the governor.
And consent of the governor is a very polite, bureaucratic way of saying, keep out.
Exactly. It was a legal tool for racial segregation. But what's truly fascinating is the justification they put on paper. They didn't write down, we want this area exclusively for white people. They used the language of sanitation and public health.
Right. The research mentions this sanitary excuse they leaned on.
The colonial government argued that they desperately needed to preserve the southern area as a health resort. They claimed they had to prevent the building of what they called cubicles.
Like subdivided flats.
Yes, those high-density, subdivided living spaces that were common in the Chinese commercial settlements. They associated that density with the plague and disease. So they used these arbitrary health standards as a shield to create a low-density, European-only enclave.
And who actually got to live there?
The resident list is basically a who's who of the colonial establishment. You had the London Mission, you had the New Zealand Presbyterian Mission,
Right.
You had W.W. Cadbury, yes, of the famous chocolate family, and the Attorney General at the time, C.G. Alabaster. It functioned as a gated community for Western missionaries and wealthy merchants.
It wasn't just blindly accepted by the locals, though, was it? The notes highlight some pretty serious opposition right in the Legislative Council.
Yes, and this is a really important part of the historical record. Two prominent Chinese members of the Legislative Council, Ho Fuk and Lao Chu Pak, actively fought this.
Okay.
You have to remember the context. This is 1919. World War I has just ended.
And the Chinese community had significantly supported the British war effort.
They had. So Ho and Lao argued that passing a law that effectively banned Chinese citizens from the best, breeziest part of their own island was a massive slap in the face. They explicitly called out the hypocrisy.
Yeah.
They essentially said, you're talking about health and fresh air, but what you're really creating is a racial reservation.
This segregation even extended to the water, didn't it? The names of the beaches tell the whole story.
They do. Now, this part wasn't written into the ordinance, but it was strictly enforced by custom and sometimes the police. Wan was widely known as Afternoon Beach, and that was reserved for Europeans.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the Chinese residents were expected to use Tongwan, which was colloquially called Police Beach.
Afternoon Beach versus Police Beach. You can visualize the entire social hierarchy just from those two names alone.
It's a perfect illustration of how land law and social custom reinforce each other. You have the Wong clan squeezing the locals for transfer fees down in the crowded village, and the colonial government barring them from the fresh air up on the hill.
So we promised X-ray vision at the start of the show. If our listener actually goes to Cheung Chau this weekend, maybe to grab a mango mochi or go for a hike, where can they see the physical scars of this history? What are the hidden gems that prove this actually happened?
There are three specific spots I'd tell anyone to look for. The first is a literal line in the stone. If you walk up Peak Road, keep your eyes on the stone foundations of the older buildings. Specifically, you are looking for boundary stone number 14.
Stone 14, where is it exactly?
It is embedded directly in the foundation of St. John's Hospital. That granite stone was the official marker. Below it was the Chinese village. Above it was the European reservation.
That is wild.
When you walk past that stone today, you are physically crossing the invisible line that Ho Fook was arguing so passionately about in 1919.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
I bet most people probably lean against it while tying their shoe and have no idea what it represents. What's the second gem?
The second is a place called the Prayer Garden. It's located on the site of what used to be house number 10.
House 10.
Yes, this used to be the treasurer's house for the New Zealand Presbyterian Mission. Now, the original house is completely gone, but the land itself is still used for religious retreats today. It's a direct, living link to that early missionary presence on the peak. It really shows that even though the segregation laws changed, the historical usage of the land has a very long memory.
Okay, and the third one, because this is something I've actually seen painted on walls there, but never understood what it meant.
You're talking about the DDCC signs.
Yeah.
If you look at older property plates on the island or look at a land map, you'll constantly see DDCC followed by a lot number.
What does that actually stand for?
It stands for Demarcation District Cheung Chau. This is a direct relic of the 1899 survey team. When the British officially took over the new territories, they sent Indian surveyors out with theodolites, those tripod surveying instruments, to map everything. They literally turned the muddy agricultural fields and winding footpaths into a strict taxable grid.
So seeing DDCC on a wall is basically seeing the exact moment the island was translated from an organic fishing community into a colonial asset on a spreadsheet.
Exactly. It's the underlying code of the modern city. But, and this is where the story gets even richer, before those surveyors ever arrived with their theodolites, and long before the British drew their boundary lines, the island wasn't just some chaotic void.
Right, which brings us to the shadow government. We've talked about the clan, we've talked about the colonizers, but the outline for our deep dive mentions a third power center that actually predates them all, the temple.
Yes, specifically the Paktai Temple, or Yukwikung.
Now, most tourists just go there to see the antique iron sword or to take photos of the roof architecture.
Right, it's beautiful. But if you look at the mid-19th century, say roughly 1850 to 1898, this religious building was effectively acting as City Hall.
We often hear in history books that the Qing government was very hands-off in the outer islands, but that usually just means they were absent. So who was actually running the place?
The community basically ran itself. The sources detail a structure called the Four Mountains.
Four Mountain.
Now that sounds like a martial arts clan from a movie, but mountain, in this specific historical context, refers to a community or a dialect group.
Oh, so you had different tribes, essentially.
Exactly. You had the Guangzhou, the Cantonese speakers, the Hoklo, the Chu Chao, and the Hakka. And these groups definitely didn't always get along. They were fiercely competing for fishing rights, anchorage space, trade. The Four Mountains was effectively a coordinating committee made up of their leaders that met at the temple to resolve these disputes without killing each other.
And we know this actually happened because they left receipts.
Right. Literally carved in stone.
Yeah.
If you go into the Paktai Temple today, take a close look at the stone tablets lining the walls. Most people think they are just lists of wealthy people who donated incense money.
Yeah.
They aren't. They are government archives.
What kind of government business are we talking about here?
Public safety, for one big example. There's a specific tablet from the 1860s detailing the defense office.
Defense stuff.
Yeah, piracy was a massive existential threat in those waters back then. The Qing Imperial Navy definitely wasn't coming to save them. So the tablets show that the residents taxed themselves to fund their own local coast guard and to build defensive watchtowers.
That is a remarkably high level of civic organization for a fishing village.
It is. And they also handled healthcare. In 1878, the Temple Committee established the Fong Pin Hospital. It was funded by 98 local businesses coming together. Now, to be fair, a hospital in the 1870s was often more of a hospice for the destitute and dying, but it was a absolutely crucial social service, and it was managed entirely by the temple leadership.
It really challenges the whole narrative that these places were just lawless frontiers before the British arrived to civilize them. There was law. It was indigenous.
It was law outside the law. It was customary law based entirely on community consensus and religious authority. And the truly interesting thing is that temple committee structure didn't just vanish when the British arrived and set up a district office.
It didn't?
No, it evolved. It eventually morphed into what became the modern rural committee, so that unbroken thread of local indigenous power is still there today.
That's amazing. So we essentially have these layers of history stacked on top of each other like a lasagna. You have the temple self-governance at the bottom, the Wong clan monopoly sitting in the middle, and the colonial segregation layered right on top.
A very complicated lasagna.
Very. But we have to close the loop on the Wong clan. We left them in the mid-20th century still collecting rent, still blocking property sales. How did that feudal system finally break?
It broke because it just became fundamentally incompatible with modern Hong Kong.
Yeah.
By the time you hit to the 1980s and 90s, Hong Kong is a premier global financial center. You have regular people wanting to buy and sell apartments, you have international banks wanting to issue mortgages, and you have this bizarre feudal transfer fees stopping the entire machinery up.
It was like a glitch in the matrix.
A very, very expensive glitch. And residents were furious. I mean, they felt they owned their homes, they maintained them, but they were being held ransom by a Qing Dynasty history they had absolutely no part in.
So with the 1997 handover looming, the government finally decided to act.
They did. In 1995, literally just 2 years before the handover to China, the government passed the Block Crown Lease Cheung Chau Ordinance. It was, for all intents and purposes, a massive act of legal decolonization.
How did it actually work? Did they just strip the Wong clan of their title overnight?
They bypassed them entirely. The government legally declared that the residents, who were previously tracked as sublessees, were now direct lessees of the crown.
Wow.
They just surgically cut the middleman out of the equation.
But surely the Wong clan didn't just quietly walk away. I mean, they had a binding legal document from 1905 saying they owned the place.
They did, and as you know, property rights are taken extremely seriously in Hong Kong. The government extinguished their rights, yes, but they legally had to pay for it.
Right.
It took years of bitter negotiation, but finally, in 2004, there was a settlement.
What was the final price tag to end a 1,000-year-old feudal claim?
The government paid the Wong clan 20 million Hong Kong dollars.
$20 million.
It was a full buyout.
Yeah.
To the residents, it felt like total liberation. To the government, it was just the cost of doing business to modernize the land registry. But it marked the official final end of the second landlord system.
That is wild.
It took nearly 100 years to dismantle a structure that the British had just frozen in place for pure administrative convenience back in 1898.
Hearing all of this, it just completely reframes the whole island for me. When you look at Cheung Chau now, you realize that Hong Kong isn't just one smooth, uniform legal system. It's this crazy patchwork of these little historical anomalies.
And that's the true beauty of looking at land history. Land is never just dirt.
No.
It's power, it's history, it's social hierarchy made physical. When you look at a property map, you aren't just looking at coordinates. You are looking at the frozen results of arguments, compromises, and power struggles that happened decades, sometimes centuries ago.
Absolutely. So to bring this all home, we want to leave you, our listener, with that challenge we mentioned at the start of the show. The next time you are on the ferry heading over to Cheung Chau, don't just go for the fish balls.
I mean, definitely go for the fish balls, but look at the walls while you eat them.
Right. Look for the DDCC code on the little house plates. Walk up Peak Road to St. John's Hospital and find Stone 14.
Yeah.
Stand right there and try to imagine that invisible line that used to separate the so-called health resort from the village below.
And then ask yourself, what other invisible lines are we walking across every single day in our own cities? How many other normal-looking neighborhoods are secretly shaped by 100-year-old compromises that we can no longer see?
Cheung Chau is basically a museum of land law, disguised as a fun holiday island. It's a great reminder that history is literally built right into the foundations. Well, thanks for diving in with us today.
Always a pleasure.
See you next time.